Hey everyone, welcome to EventIcons. My name is Will Curran. We're back again with another episode, and today we're talking about one of my favorite topics that is never talked about, and that is event operations. It's not sexy, it's not exciting, it's not some trends, it's not some new app, but we all need to do it. We need to have the best on-site operations as possible. So we have two amazing guests, one of which I've had a lot of conversations about this with, and we'll be jumping right on in. So why don't we kick in that intro and start talking a little bit about on-site operations and how we can make our events even better. Let's kick that intro.
It's Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, so you know what that means. It's time for another episode of #EventIcons,
presented by Endless Events.
the show where you get to ask the icons of the events industry anything. Use the question panel on the webinar to submit your questions. Or you can hop on Twitter. Submit your questions with #EventIcons.
We'll be answering your questions live during the entire show.
Before we get started, the more people we have watching, the better conversation we can have. So please help share #EventIcons on Twitter and Facebook.
Just tell your friends to watch at www.event-icons.com.
Now, without any further delay, this is #EventIcons.
All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, EventIcons. We're going to jump right on into this week's episode. Like I said, we're talking about event operations. It ain't sexy, but we need it, and we need it to run really, really well. So I brought two of the pros along with me to talk about this. First one I'm going to introduce is Chris Roberts. Chris is the founder of EventOps software. If you haven't heard of EventOps, Chris is going to talk, I'm sure, plenty about it, but his goal in life is to make people's event operations run smoother and more like a business, which I think sometimes we need to really do that a little bit more often. Chris is an absolute pro. We've had a ton of conversations about this, and I'm so excited to have you here today. Everybody welcome Chris Roberts in the house.
Hello, hello, hello.
All right, Chris, real quick, if you can kind of dive in and tell us a little bit about what got you to where you are today, and talk maybe a little bit about how you guys came up with this idea of EventOps and why it exists today.
Yeah, sure. Well, the way I got here is a lot of caffeine, really. But in general, so me and a group of other folks were doing design for a large golf event, and we realized as we had this really great process for design, and we had all these beautiful 3D models, and we could sell stuff, and we could do all this great design. But when it came to the actual execution and the building of the event, it was still being done on walkie-talkies and Excel spreadsheets and emails, and it was just messy. And it worked. It's worked for 30 years doing it the same way. But we just thought there had to be a better way. So like good tech students, we went out and searched the web, searched the world for tech, and just couldn't find something that could handle the rigor of a real event, right? We could find tons of checklists, right? Well, that's great. There's lots of events that need checklists. We found some good spreadsheet examples of things. We never really found something that could handle outside vendors, inside vendors, and having all this just madness happening all at the same time. And when there's rain for 2.5 weeks and your whole production schedule gets delayed, what happens? My running joke is sane, rational people. We decided let's just make one because that's what normal people do, and started with EventOps about a little over 2 years ago now, which is kind of crazy to think it's been that long. But we've been rigorously building ever since.
That's amazing. And you guys are starting to pick up some big clients now and some big events, right?
Yeah. We're really starting to get some traction, which is exciting and really scary all at the same time.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, hey, thank you again for being on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Also joined by me is the lovely Liz Lathan. Liz is a pro. And when I talked to Chris and I said, hey, we got to do an episode on this. And I said, who else are you going to put on this episode with us? He said, Liz has to be on this episode. So we had to absolutely make it happen. So I want to welcome to the show Liz Lathan. She is a pro when it comes to events. And my favorite thing is your bio when you described yourself is as a connector that brings people together to make awesome events. So I love it because that's how we all end up meeting is that connections, which is so awesome. So welcome to the show, Liz.
Thank you so much. Thrilled to be here.
Awesome. Well, Liz, can you kind of give everyone the kind of rundown, like what got you in the events industry and like what got you into this lovely thing known as event operations?
So the event industry, I would have to say, even when I was a kid, I used to help my mom when she did trade show booths, and she sold stuff to gift shops, and I would help her go set up her little pop-up booth and put the stuff out there and take orders. So I never really thought of it as events. But then after graduating with a journalism degree from college, I went and did some marketing, and I would say that I got into events because of wine. What happened was I was working helping with the user conference for my first job. And the girl that was in charge of registration for the whole conference at the Christmas party fell down the stairs and got a wine glass through her hand and was like out for 8 weeks with surgery. And I was, 22 years old, straight out of college, and they put me in charge of all of registration. And so I was hooked. I mean, it was insane. You had to get the sales team excited to sell the tickets. And then on site the day of the event, as soon as the buses show up, the internet goes out in the entire venue. And we couldn't do any registration whatsoever. And I was in charge of all of it. And I loved it. I have never looked back. And when I joined Dell a few years after that, and my job there was operation stuff. So I really started out, before managing the team, I started out in that underpinnings of putting together the quarterly business review and creating the event software and the technology stack and trying to make sure all these things connected. And so that's what I've loved.
I love it. I think definitely when it comes to operations, there's a certain like high you get from it. And I think we all end up getting that and brings us to the industry, and we hear it all the time. But like that whole thing, like internet going down, problem solve, I think is like every event professional's like biggest nightmare, but also the coolest story you get to tell at the bar the next week, right?
That's right. Everybody
Awesome.
grab a pencil. We're checking them in by hand.
Well, we're so excited to have you here today, Liz, and Chris. We're so excited to have you here as well. So let's jump right in. We want to talk about event operations. This is such a broad topic, though. I think sometimes event operations is hard to define because it probably differs between team to team and what's considered operations, which is what's considered registration. Who does marketing get pulled in operations? So I want to talk to you guys for this purpose of this conversation. How would you define what event operations is, and what should that team look like? So I'll kick it over to you, Liz, if you want to kind of define a little bit what you think I would consider event operations.
I mean, for me, event operations is anything that is behind the scenes that allows an event professional to more quickly, efficiently, smoothly make the event happen for the attendee. But those operations, I call them behind the scenes, they have the front of house piece that has to connect. So it's an attendee experience piece too. But I mean, operations it's everywhere. And I don't think you can be a really good event manager if you don't understand how it connects.
Ooh, I like it. Chris, what about you? How would you define operations?
Yeah, so I usually just say that it's because I always cheat and kind of lump logistics and operations into the same thing. It's not by any means, but I always lump it in the same. So I just say it's essentially everything. It's the planning and execution of everything that attendees see, sit, and eat, or sit on and eat, and they don't know why it's there or how it got there, or who paid for it, or when it showed up, or when it's leaving, or any of that. Right? It's basically everything that goes into making the attendee experience just as amazing as it can be, but not necessarily the stuff that's in your face that you're looking at. It's everything that is just there, that has to be there, has to be right, that has to just work every single time without any issues.
Ooh, interesting. So almost like you equate it to this idea of like a magician, right? Like you have this going on in front of it, but there's all this stuff happening behind the scenes that you never see.
It's very Wizard of Ozzy, right? Like that.
Yeah,
Man or woman behind the curtain, like don't pay no attention to the person sweating with no binders. We can't do binders anymore. We're getting rid of those. With sweat pouring down their brow, but looking professional and composed the entire time, making sure everything works. Yeah.
Awesome. I love it. When it comes down to this, I want to make sure that we're on 121 episodes. So I feel like we dove into every single topic possible, but we never talked about actually on-site operations. A lot of times we hear the terms and like titles of things like project manager, event manager, things like that. How would you describe what's the traditional role that you would say an event operations person gets called? Is it just a traditional event manager? Is it a project manager? Are there similar skills kind of you've seen, Chris, that you're kind of shaking your head no? What's kind of your thought process behind that?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think it's an offshoot of having, not to get philosophical necessarily, but it's an offshoot of not having this sort of rigorous program. See, I came from a civil engineering background. That's what I went to school for. And, to call yourself a civil engineer, you've got to take all these tests and do all this stuff. And so there's a very defined thing. An engineer is an engineer, a civil engineer does bridges and roads. And, but when it comes to event management, there's not that sort of rigorous, predefined, this is what it is. So, because people like to have certifications and training, they've trained themselves as CMPs or as project managers or any of that. So, I don't necessarily see event management and project management as interchangeable necessarily. It's interesting because one of the things that I realized a couple months ago, and it's amazing it took me this long to realize, is like there's only two jobs on the planet where you have to be simultaneously strategic and tactical, right? You have to be able to like do stuff and make decisions right now and think about what's going to happen in 6 months or 12 months. And those two jobs are startup founder and event manager. And that's it. There's no other jobs that you have to be simultaneously strategic and tactical. So it's been really, really fun to learn how to do my job better from folks that do this every single day on large scale events, and then sharing what we're doing to try to build this business and how it affects, how they approach events as well. So
that's awesome. Yeah. Liz, what do you kind of thoughts as far as like the title association when it comes to the event operations team and kind of their skill set?
Well, are you asking project manager versus event manager or event operations manager versus an event manager? Do
you kind of like, I guess, agree, I should say, do you agree with this idea that like a project manager is the same thing as an event operations person, which I think sometimes we end up lumping together?
Yeah, so I think there's three different jobs that we're talking about. I think that event managers are project managers, but project managers may not be event managers.
Well, yeah.
And I think that event operations managers may not be event managers.
Ooh,
so
okay.
My delineation would be that a project manager is managing the projects and doing all of the Kanban, Six Sigma, lean, agile processes, and they have all of the ways to ensure that they're moving the ball down the field. An event manager is pretty much doing all that. They may not be using agile, they may not be using any of those principles, but they are also making sure that you have a certificate of insurance, that the food and beverage has gluten-free options, that the sales team is enabled to follow up on the leads, that you've got scripts for them post-event. You're doing so much more than just project management. And then an event operations manager is ensuring that the execution and reporting of those events is happening in the back end so that the event managers can create the experience and that the sales teams can follow up on all of the leads the event managers are bringing in.
Ooh, interesting. So it's almost kind of like this idea you think of this, like someone's over there maybe creating kind of like Chris talking about the strategy or like the vision of what it looks like. Event operations people are like pardon my French, the get shit doneers. Like they're the ones on site pushing cases, making sure things are in the right place, making sure that vision kind of comes to life.
As a former event operations manager, we like to call ourselves the mushrooms. We're in the dark room being fed shit. Yes.
That's fantastic. That better have been live tweeted. Was that live tweeted?
That's probably going to be live tweeted right now. See,
I think
mushrooms.
I think too. I mean, people. It's really, really hard to be strategic and tactical in the same brain. So I think just like any other position, you end up with folks that are really, really good at the marketing and the front end and the the attendees and the sales and all of that, and then folks that actually are in the dark room being fed shit, right? Actually doing the actual execution. So
uploading the leads, making sure that they're getting followed up on, or keeping that project management thing alive. So a lot of times your event operations managers may be PMP project manager folks who are following agile principles, but they understand the complexities of events and how they coordinate.
Yeah. I mean, it's analogous to the construction industry too. I mean, building a building and building an event, there's a lot of similarities between those two. And you kind of have the same, concept that you have this sort of, it's just the line gets a lot muddier in events than it does with any other industry. I mean, it's a very, very gray dotted line that's barely visible between what is event management, event planning, and event operations. I mean, really, in a lot of cases, one thing that I've been absolutely just every day I'm impressed by is how a team of 3 or a team of 5 can do like 70 events a year. We've got like 8 clients that way, right? They've got 4 or 5 people that are doing 80 events a year. In fact, one of them's on the call with us right now. Just a crazy amount of work. How does that happen? I can't, still can't figure it out. It's amazing.
Do you think there's any like skill sets that you think that are undervalued when it comes to the event operations side that people like think, obviously, like you kind of like you're saying the mushroom, like you're able to just get shit done, and you're talking about taking tactical and marrying strategy with it. What sort of other skill sets do you think are needed to succeed in event operations? Go
I
ahead,
think
Liz.
curiosity is an undervalued skill set. You have to not just pull reports, but you have to wonder why those numbers are coming back the way they are, and be able to understand when they look off and figure out what's going on.
Ooh.
Yeah, I can't come up with anything better than that. That was amazing. Yeah.
Boom, mic drop moment here on
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. That's awesome. Do you think there's a skill set that you think is not, so you talk a little about curiosity, maybe that's lacking a little bit, but do you think there's any other skill sets that you see event operations people are sometimes lacking, right? Like we talked about like the kind of get shit done people, but are you finding like, for example, are they not able to think that strategic? Are they not able to think further than the task ahead of them? What sort of skill sets do you see as being the gap that most event operations people don't have?
Yeah, I mean, I think in my experience, the team members that are really focused on operations and reporting and metrics, they actually have the most strategic brains if you can tap into it, because they're seeing the patterns. And if you allow them the opportunity to understand what the buyer's journey is in the marketing funnel and how to align these results and the projects and everything to the funnel, they can turn out to be super strategic. So I wouldn't say there's a gap there. I would say the gap is in allowing them to see the sunlight and be able to become strategic.
Mm.
Yeah, I would second that, because, one of the things that we hear a lot is about, well, I don't have time to take up new tech or look at new tech or really understand. There's a bit of bucket of technology out there that affects operations, but because there's not enough time to actually sit down and figure out how it's going to work. And every operations group delivers events differently, right? So everybody has their own way to do things. Everybody has, we really like to do it this way. So it's really hard to build or implement technology in such a way that it can actually, help every different group, because it's really hard to come in and say, okay, well, you've done this event successfully for 6 years, right? It makes money. Attendees are super happy. Your survey results are high, right? But we have this solution to do it better. And they go, well, how? How can we do it better? We're making money. Our attendees are happy, right? The survey results are high. So how do we actually do it? What does better actually mean at that point, right? It becomes more of a business case than an operation side. But and I think, but to Liz's point about curiosity, but also tech, I think giving folks that are operations focused the time to actually step back and be strategic and look at patterns and deliver and understand how they can do things better, or how they can, execute in a different way, or try, or experimentation. I think that's another one, that curiosity. I think curiosity and experimentation is another one. That's been one of my most favorite things about working, in the golf market, is that they experiment with everything, and you don't see it. Nobody would know unless you're a part of that team what they're like different scrim colors and different heights of, the bar where people are standing, and how does it look on television, and how do people respond to it. That experimentation, that curiosity is really, really cool to see actually play out, and see how it affects, or doesn't in fact affect, the success of the event.
I think what you guys said about like an interesting point too. I'm going to come back to something that you said, Liz, in a little bit. But before I get into that, I have so many questions. You talked a little bit about like this process and how everyone has a different process. Do you think that, like we've talked a lot about in the events industry, like it sucks because we're not very highly regulated. There's a different way to do a million different things. And because of that, I'm sure, especially when you've seen with the implementation of software, is that some people everyone does a little bit differently. Someone uses this tool and this tool and this tool. What sort of like consistent processes do you think that an event operations person should master to be the best at what they do? For example, I'm going to take the easy one, scheduling, right? Like figuring out how to build accurate schedules. It can go beyond just, hey, when is stuff getting delivered and installed, but also mastering the schedule throughout the event, but also even down to like what we do on the AV side with show calling is like queue to queue walkthroughs. That's obviously a process that we think at all event operators people that you have to absolutely master. You have to know how, when things come in, what happens when it doesn't come in, how do you rearrange, kind of like the traffic controller. What other sort of like processes do you think that event operations people need that you think they have to master? Chris, I'll kick that back to you since you're the software operations master.
Yeah, sure. So shameless plug, we've actually built some of that production scheduling, some of that mastery of schedule into the software recently at the request of many, many people. Like, how do I manage my different people? So I would say that the skill there that has to be mastered is delegation. One of the things that I heard from somebody that ran CES for many years, and it's just stuck in my brain ever since I heard it, was that the reason being an event manager is so stressful. Like, the reason it's a top 5 most stressful job, it's deadlines don't move. There's shrinking budgets. There's all of that. But the reason it's really, really stressful is that at its core, your success depends on everybody else doing their job. And so it was like one of those things, somebody says it and immediately like, yeah, absolutely. That's exactly why. It never really dawned on me. That's why. And so I think, managing that delegation side and really, kind of surrounding yourself with a really strong core of people that you can train up to do the individual pieces. So you really become the master orchestrator, and then the other folks go out and do things. That I think is really, really important, being able to organize how the execution should happen, not just from a scheduling standpoint, but how it should actually, how it actually affects X, Y, and Z throughout the day, and how to actually deliver those things and delegate it to folks and trust that they can do it right. Train them up, spend the time to make sure they do it right.
I just want to like reiterate that quote you said, I think was really interesting. The stress doesn't come from like deadlines and things like that. The stress becomes you 100% rely on other people. And I think that's also, like you said, you have to be amazing, good at delegation, and it puts the emphasis on hiring a great team. So it's awesome. Liz, what kind of are your thoughts as far as like the necessary processes that you need to have in order to be successful in event operations?
Honestly, I'm not sure that it matters what the process is, as long as there is one. I think, I know we'll talk about resources later, but there's a great book called Turn the Ship Around, where the Navy captain, it creates this leader culture instead of a leader-follower culture, where the leader is empowering each of the next line below him to create the processes necessary to get the job done the most efficient way. So as long as you, as the top line leader, can trust that your leaders have developed something that is repeatable and followable, then I think you're safe.
Ooh, I like it. Any other like processes or anything like that you think that people need to have to be super successful? Before I go on to my next question. All right. I'm going to jump into our next question. So I actually realized that we started talking about success, but we've never defined what successful operations looks like. How do you guys define successful operations? And then let's jump into maybe ways that we can measure that. So maybe if you guys want to jump into talking about success. So Chris, maybe if you want to talk a little bit about like, how do you guys measure success when it comes to operations?
Yeah. So, we don't define other success just because that's a scary thing to try to do. What we like to do is I think the most important part of success, kind of like Liz said, it's not about the process, it's about having one. I think same with success. It's, everybody's success is different. It depends on the goal of your event, right? If it's to attract more people and sell your brand, then success is engaging attendees and ensuring that they're that they're actually buying stuff as they leave, or signing up for a mailing list or whatever those things may be. In terms of operations, though, I think success is not having to work 740 hours a day for a week before an event happens, right? Getting your process down to a point where, you're actually, let's be candid. You're not going to be sitting with your feet up at the end of every day for 2.5 hours, taking a break and getting a massage. That's just the reality of, the way this industry goes. But I think it's, it's not, to me, what success is it's not having an issue, right? Power goes out, internet doesn't work. That stuff's going to happen. Like you can't control that, right? There's just absolutely no way to control that. So I think success really has to be, how are we growing, or how do we get better than last year? To me, that's always my favorite way to measure success, is like, did we do better than last year? Okay, well, what does better actually mean? Does it mean that we use less people? Does it mean that we got things done earlier? Is it that we didn't miss anything? Is that, there's 100 million ways you can define success, but Because I'm an engineer brain, I always go back to measurable numeric things. So that's maybe good or bad. I'm sure Liz will have a totally different and far more creative way of thinking through it than I do.
Well, I think for me, defining success in event operations is when the managing of the back end of events is so intuitive and simple that event managers are free to focus on the experience and the outcomes without being mired in the task drudgery. If I'm having to spend more time managing the reporting of the task than I am producing the event, it's failure.
I love it because I think that you guys both said very similar things in different words too. And like, I think this idea of ease is like buttery smooth, like skating on ice kind of thing going on. I love it. Really quick before I keep jumping into more questions, huge audience today. I just want to give some shouts to all the people watching right now. Steve Isaacs on Facebook, Doug, Justin, Katarina, Lisa, Nicole, Reed, Sue, Viviana, just some of the people. I'm just scrolling really quickly down the list, seeing some names. Just want to give shouts. If you guys have questions, feel free to enter them into the question panel. Ask them on Facebook. These guys want to answer them. Since we were talking about metrics, we're starting to get a ton of questions about this. What kind of metrics do you guys use to measure? And maybe we can go through and just feel free to rattle them out fast. And maybe if they're a little bit more complex or a metric that you maybe made up or something that's not like obvious, like hours spent planning, like that's obviously self-explanatory. Do you want to kind of explain what that metric is? And maybe if we just want to fire off a bunch of metrics that people should be measuring, and then maybe we'll narrow it down to one or so. So Chris, I'm sure your software also does an awesome job at doing this. So I'm gonna let you kick it off with what are metrics do you use to measure when it comes to your event operations?
Yeah. How about average number of daily questions during the event? So, since we have real-time collaboration tools within the system, it's like how many requests did we get for changes the day of the event? Or how many requests did our frontline ops get because there's a carpet problem or there's beers out, whatever it may be. That's one. So if we're looking at number decrease over time, that's good.
And just to define that, you're saying questions that maybe like, for example, the bartending staff is asking the event operations person, or like the AV staff is asking the operations people. Is that like, can you define who is asking the questions?
Yeah. So really anybody can ask questions, right? So I think, it gets into a little bit of understanding what the questions are as well, but even feedback, day of. So one of the things we've experimented with or starting to experiment with is on the little checkout kiosks or check-in kiosks for the room, you've got access controls. Well, can we add some, the room's too hot button or room's too cold button, and actually get more instantaneous feedback. So we can start to measure like how many of those types of requests are we getting per day, or how many times is somebody being asked, to fix XYZ or, move a table or what have you. So those requests coming in, that's an interesting way to, over time, are those decreasing event over event? Are we getting more efficient essentially? The number of daytime production schedule changes, right? Because again, we're working in real time with real-time documents. You can see how much things change day of, and some of those things you can help and some of those things you can't, of course, which is where the event wrap up becomes such an important part of operations as well. It's not just about ROI and marketing and numbers. It's just as much about how do we actually deliver this event, and how can we do it more successfully next year. And then I think, back to the experimentation concept, if we can experiment with something and measure, did it actually do what we expected it to do? Right. One of the things that we've, not to pie in the sky this conversation too far, because I think it's really tactical at this level, but how could we even optimize the locations of our sessions so that when people have signed up for sessions, they don't have to walk quite as far, or they have to walk by a certain place, right? Those are the kinds of things that can get really interesting when it comes to measuring this success.
Awesome. I love it. Liz, what other metrics do you think that these awesome event ops need to be measuring?
Well, I have my three big categories: ROI, ROO, and ROE. So for ROI, we're measuring leads, pipeline, revenue, marketing assist, marketing create, all the stuff that's going to drive the bottom line for your business and the reason that you're running demand generating events. For ROO, that's where if we're doing learning events, it's maybe learning objectives, return on objective, social reach maybe was the objective, or number of impressions or social engagement. Maybe you had a sustainability metric that you're reporting on, or if you're doing an employee conference, then maybe you're even reporting on fun facts like how many forks were washed at the MGM in Vegas to feed the people, whatever those are. They're fun to throw up on a slide. And then ROE, which I call return on ego. And that is how happy was the executive at the end of the event after he had his party on stage.
Awesome. And then I used thought ROE was a return on experience, but I love the return on. Any other metrics, guys, that you think that people should be measuring when it comes to their event operations? One thing that kind of came to my mind was also like when a task gets assigned, like how fast things get done. I think a lot of times that's a weird metric that not a lot of people think to measure too, especially as you're getting pre-planning time. Because sometimes, if something's taking a long period of time, almost to kind of go to those agile project management skills, it allows you to basically see like, hey, maybe this isn't the right skill set. Maybe someone needs an assist here.
I think that's super fascinating because I come from the brand side. I've mostly worked for corporations my whole career, or associations. And honestly, corporations don't care how long it takes an employee to do something. The employee cares how long it takes them to do something, but the corporation is not measuring the value based on that. If you're going to work 24 hours a day to get something done, well, that's your own fault for not finding a better way for the most part. But now I'm on the agency side, and while we're not necessarily to the point where we're tracking hours yet, I start thinking through that. Like, oh my gosh, my team really shouldn't be spending that much time filling boxes. There's got to be a quicker way to do this. And why are we doing this in Word when we should be using Wrike and, some of those things. So yeah, I think that's an interesting metric, but I'd be curious to see how much corporations and associations care about that.
Totally. I definitely, I think, Chris, you brought up a good point earlier about the idea, like it's very similar to a startup founder's mindset, this idea like that split thought process, but very much, I think a lot of times people need to start using more startup level kind of thinking because especially like you said, in the larger corporations, you get kind of stuck and you get stuck in these existing processes and how they have to be done. But like, I think, for example, I'm going to bring this back to last episode, which is the inbound episode. They talk about like them being a separate team from HubSpot. They get their own freedom to do things. I feel like more events need to be able to do that. They need to have that freedom, be like, we're going to just experiment like crazy and do some crazy things. Chris, what about you? What are your kind of thoughts on metrics and time to get shit done kind of things?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of time tracking. I never have been. And I think Liz is absolutely right. Like corporations don't care how long it takes you to do stuff, right? You're paid to do a job and you're paid to get the job done. And if it takes you 24 hours and there's a way you could be spending 10, that's your responsibility to figure it out. I think that's also why corporations, a lot of times money helps, but that driver of the person actually trying to make their life, their job easier is a little bit, is why they drive toward technology quicker. I would say too that, I find myself habitually having to challenge folks to ask, like, if you could wave a magic wand, I hate that expression, but it works. Like if you could wave a magic wand and you could get X, Y, Z out of our software, what would it be? Right. And it may be that we can do X and Y. It might be that we can't do any of them. Right. But those things are really great. I think we should be demanding a lot more out of all of our tech to basically figure, that ultimately is one of the only ways that we can gather efficiencies. Like some things just take time. Like some tasks are just like, it takes time to brand an event. It just takes time. Right. But if we can spend time doing that, and not time like redoing our production schedule because we basically had the same production schedule last year, just with different people, then yeah, that's obviously where we should be spending our time. Right. So I think I like to hear that Liz is like looking at it like, wait a minute, I have a lot of people doing a lot of stuff that they really shouldn't be doing because it's why should they be checking boxes or why should they be copying, this event request to here or doing this, but there's a lot of that, because there really isn't the tech is too fragmented and the teams are too fragmented. And you've got, back to that idea of your job it depends on everybody else doing their job successfully. You've got 96 vendors or 4 vendors, whatever it is, and they all have their own process, right? Well, you've got your process for how you guys do, your execution, and it might be different, and it definitely is different than others. But when you start putting all these vendors together and all these processes together and all these, it starts to get really, really muddy. Very, very quickly.
Talking about software, I think this is an area that we might go down a rabbit hole. And I know, Chris, you guys have your amazing tool, which I want you to we'll talk about at the end, I think. But in the meantime, what sort of tools should people be using other than EventOps that they should be using, or maybe even if they're considering starting to bring software in to help with these things? What sort of tools do you types of tools, specific tools that you think that people should use? So for example, I'm going to use one that I think a lot of people will say is Slack. Slack obviously is a great way to build up departments, great automated answers when someone asks a question, a bot says XYZ, you can connect your project management software so everyone knows when things are completed or in progress. Easy tool. Everyone talks about it. I feel like it's the most mentioned thing on this podcast, and I love Slack. But what other sort of tools do you think are necessary, software-wise or even hardware-wise, that make event operations a lot easier? Chris, go ahead.
Zapier, all day long. That's
Can you
the
explain
best.
what it is for those who don't know what?
Yeah. So Zapier is quite frankly the best idea anybody's had in tech in a long, long time. So basically, Zapier is a way for non-tech folks to be able to get to applications to talk to each other. Like if you don't know if you don't know what API stands for, and you don't need to, it's basically being able to allow you to set up, like, in a very, very straightforward way. Like, okay, when my Google Calendar shows that I'm in a meeting, change my Slack status to in a meeting, as a basic example. Or when we have a new registration come through our website, like, I want you to email this person and I want you to add them to this list. It allows you to basically connect thousands of different applications together in such a way that you can not have to do a lot of things. In fact, the other day I was working with some of our friends over at Glisser, and I was asking if I could have access to their Glisser Live. And he said, yeah, great. Hold on. Just give me a second. Went into Slack. He typed in like 3 lines, and I had access. I had emails, notifications. I was signed up, ready to go. And they had, through Zapier, they had built basically the onboarding of their software into Slack. I'm like, that is genius. Like, no coding required, nothing, right? They just basically got it to line up. It's amazing. So Zapier, 100% best piece of tech ever.
I'm going to mention a Zapier integration I created, which is small, and it sounds trivial compared to actual things like onboarding your customers. But we have it set up that whenever we have a new employee, it sends a message in the water cooler, which is the channel everyone's a part of, and it welcomes them from, we have Albert Einstein, since we're like, we call ourselves Einstein's at events. Albert Einstein welcomes them, posts a random GIF of like excitement, tags them and says, thank you so much, like, introduce yourself and this, things like that. And it's just a really simple way to like kick off something that's repeatable every single day whenever we get new teammates and new employees joining the company. Super duper cool. But like doing that, super easy to do. I 100% agree with Zapier. I call it Zapier, but I'm definitely wrong. And Viviana actually had a good question in the channel about Zapier, spelling it right. Yes, Zapier. If you are curious about any of the things we mentioned, we'll do a show notes every single week on Tuesdays. We'll post it on our blog, and we'll have the link at the end of this episode for you to check out. And we'll post all the resources, so you don't have to worry about taking notes. We got that taken care of for you. But yeah, Zapier. I call it Zapier, whatever.
I don't actually know what's right. I feel like I've heard. I love their story too. As a software company, they raised $138,000. That's it, and everything else has been organic growth. And now they have 138 people. They're a distributed company. They've got folks all over the world. They'll pay you San Francisco wages to live anywhere, so you can live close to your family if that's what you want to do. You still get a great wage. You still have awesome benefits, and you can, be anywhere. They have folks that work for them that have no location. It just says nomad, which is, I think, pretty cool. Zapier's blog and newsletter also are good, really good ones to follow, because they'll have some really clever things that people think of, and you're just like, I would have never thought to do that. It's really smart.
I will concur with that. I don't read a lot of content fully, but like every single one of the newsletters, I always open it up, and they do a really good job about being like the 22 ways to use Google Docs you've never thought of. And it's not just like, hey, you can use it for a checklist. It's like really mind-blowing ways of doing things. Examples of their Zapier integration. So cool.
Yeah, like last week was like, how do you download every image from a PDF file? Like they had a Zap where you could basically upload a PDF and it'll download all the images out of it. I'm like, that's amazing. Yes. How do you do that? It's awesome.
I love that. Efficiency. I'm going to come back to you, Chris, because you're full of software ideas. Liz, what other software and tools do you think are really helpful for making the event operations processes here?
Mine is totally lame compared to that. That's mind-blowing stuff. I'm all Trello, Slack, and Excel.
Awesome. They're good. I think far too often, this gets said, I think a couple times in these episodes, like these tools, like also it doesn't matter what tool. I think sometimes we get like, ooh, sexy new tool. I get that way for sure. But sometimes like it's about how you use it. Unless you can implement that tool 100% and get everyone to switch over, sometimes like it does go back to.
That's my challenge. It'll be a cold day in hell when you can actually pry Excel out of an event manager's hands.
That's true. I don't know. Google Sheets is doing a pretty good job.
Well, sure. But the point being, I mean, I love all of the tools that exist for project management, but you've got your product marketers that are using some sort of agile tool. You've got, other departments that are using whatever. So everyone's common language, like math, right? Your common language is Excel. So as long as your tool can export and import to and from Excel, then you can still talk to the rest of your departments.
Liz and I just had such a good conversation about this a couple weeks ago, because I was asking her, like, Liz, help me understand how we can make our budgeting tool more effective for you. And she was like, just make it talk to Excel. And I was like, why? I don't want to go to Excel. And she said, that's me being very candid, by the way. And she says, well, because that is exactly what you just said, which I have to, it bears repeating, is that it is the common language of events, right? Because your finance department can speak it, and your attendees can speak it, and your AV guys can speak it, and everybody speaks the language of Excel, or at least of spreadsheet, right? Whether it's Excel or any other spreadsheet, whether it's, even SendGrid is still a spreadsheet. It's just a spreadsheet.
Or Smart Sheets or Google Docs or whatever. Yeah.
All spreadsheets. That's exactly right. But that's the common language. And I never thought about it that way. I thought that was really good. I had to repeat that, Liz. That was awesome.
I love that. I love that. Any other cool tools that you guys think are necessary? I'm going to throw out another one, which is it's actually this bad boy right here. One of my new favorite things. It still needs a little bit of improvement, but Evernote made this. There used to be a company called LiveScribe that did the same thing. It's a pen that you'll notice on the end of it looks a little different. It has a camera that captures everything you write. I think far too often we love writing everything down, but we don't have backups of this. I lose this notebook. It's gone forever. All my ideas and everything like that, and especially event operations, which spread across a year of planning. Great way. Figure out some sort of way to digitize your notes, whether it's like handing it over to someone and digitize it. I think far too often we have these notes and we spend time flipping through pages, but use a tool like this is called the Evernote, or no, it's the Moleskine. I don't know. I said Evernote.
It's called the
Moleskine Smart Notebook or something like that. I'll link to it in the resources, but have some sort of tool like that. I think can be really, really incredible. Evernote scan pages. I used to use this erasable notebook, but something good like that too, that you can go to. That's not just your typical notebook. Is huge.
Milanote. That's I am in love with Milanote. 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 They build these canvases, and you can basically put anything you want to into a canvas, and you can build. It's like idea boards, or you can actually put in little checklists. We've actually thought about integrating directly with Milanote, so you could on a task you could actually have a Milanote board for your task. So you could if your task is basically to build a registration page, well, now you can bring in logos and precedent images and other examples of ones you like. Milanote is brilliant. That's an awesome piece of tech as well. I love that. It's like Evernote it's like Evernote 10.0. It's what Evernote really should be. It's awesome.
Ooh, I like that. Oh my gosh. I'm starting to get towards my resources question. I'm going to try to avoid us, and we'll come back to some of these because sometimes I just get so excited talking about tech. I want to talk about budgeting. We talked about budgeting a couple times. People are starting to ask about it as well in the chat. And people want to know, how do you guys budget when it comes to event operations? What sort of Excel, obviously, for budgets, right? But do you guys have a certain philosophy around it? Do you have any sort of tips and tricks that comes to when budgeting this sort of stuff? How do you deal with changes on site? How do you deal with reactive, all the things that happened that you had to swipe on the credit card because it just had to happen? What's kind of your thought process around budgeting, Liz?
So I think that it's very reactive when you're on site. It's just a matter of kind of doing that management piece. But up front, when you sit down and create the budget and you have your full event P&L statement, and we try to identify which ones are going to be paid by which mechanism. Is it going to be a credit card or a purchase order or running through somebody else, but you still need to track it separately so that we know at the end, and our accountant knows at the end, which direction they're going to need to pull the information from. So step one is identifying that up front, which honestly we finally realized one day that would help us. Shocking. But then bucketing things into consistent buckets. So when you're starting, this is one thing, now that we've started this agency here, we're able to actually set up the event operations appropriately so that it will help us in the end instead of inheriting things that are 20 years old from a company that we're already in. So we can set those categories and know that if we're it's not just AV, but we can break down what within the AV we really care about. So we're able to report on it at the end of the quarter. What really are we spending on the projectors, and what really are we spending on, just screens versus venues, and trying to figure that stuff out. So I think that's really helpful. And then on site, having that one person who can approve the change order requests.
Like a final, like an approver that only that person can give the final yes.
And it may be that they're going to say yes to everything, but just the process of getting everyone who's on staff, whether they're staffer, volunteer, attendee, whatever, whoever's asking for something, this person has to know that it's happening. And I've done that with a 6,000 person user conference. And yes, it is a huge pain in the patootie that you got to go find that one guy for him to say yes. And he's got his phone attached to his ear the whole time. But just for him to know that it's happening helped us in the end, because all the stuff's happening all the time. And you can just go to him and go, what was that?
Cool. I love that. Chris, what about you? What's your philosophy around budgeting?
The messiest part of events. Well, we actually, it's funny, we actually just completely redid our budgeting. Not completely, we redid about 2/3 of it. We kept the weird organization schema, being able to organize things any way that you want, so that you could do things like what Liz is talking about. I still think the most difficult part about budgeting with events is just that there's not really a beautifully standard way to do it. Even event to event, how you're setting up your budgets varies vastly. And how does a corporate event team set up their budget versus how does an agency set up their budget? And actually, to me, what I'm most interested in right now, because I think it's where we can have the biggest impact, is how do you share that? Like, whether that's sharing it to get input from a vendor, or whether that's sharing it to your CFO, or whether that's sharing it to your team, or whether it's sharing it to your client, right? And you want the same information to be accessible by all of those different folks in a way that actually makes sense for them, right? And again, that's why Excel becomes sort of the default. The problem with the beautiful part about Excel or spreadsheets is that they're infinitely flexible. The bad part about spreadsheets is that they're infinitely flexible, so that you can do the same thing over and over again. And that on-site approvals really does become a big piece. The other part, surprising enough for me, was the pain of invoicing and how just incredibly difficult it can be. Let's not even get into GL codes and accounting, none of that stuff, right? Literally just what did we estimate we were going to pay for it versus what did we think we're going to pay for it? Those are two different things. Versus what is somebody else say we should pay for it, right? Then what did we actually pay for it? And then what did we really pay for it, right? Because that's really what the 5 phases are. It's not like, we call them cute things like estimated and actual and projected, and but really that's exactly what it is, right? It's how much do we estimate, how much do we think somebody else say it's going to be, how much does somebody else charge us, and how much do we actually pay them? Because all of those can be different. And tracking those changes and being able to somehow relate that back to the success of the event, right? It's not always about ROI, because ROI can be many, many different things. It's also about, like, how does this vendor charge, right? They may be the cheapest vendor when you start every single year, right? But have you ever seen that picture? It's a super old picture where you have a gigantic yacht and then you have a little tugboat next to it, and the little tugboat's name is original contract and the yacht's name is change order. That's one of my favorites, because that there's a lot of folks that kind of operate with that mentality. So being able to keep track of that, and then if you can do it at the same time as tracking, like, how quickly do they take up tasks and answer things, how fast can they actually, and it's going out of this sort of anecdotal rating of your vendors and of your suppliers, and actually being able to measure, like, how are they actually doing? Are they actually doing their job effectively? And are they charging us, maybe they're charging us 20% more to begin with, but look at the service we're getting. We're getting a white glove service. We're not getting a bunch of change orders. We're calling them at the last minute, like, we totally messed up. We need different projectors, whatever, happening over here, and you just make it happen, right? And it goes. So that sort of tying the budget to the actual delivery of things is where I think there's a lot of future potential for tech to really start to understand that.
And also on the corporate side, I would say level setting from the very beginning as to what actually counts toward your budget. If you're doing a sales conference, the sales team members' T&E might not be a part of your overall budget number. So when someone asks you how much your event costs, Are you giving them accurate information? Are you telling them really what the production part of the event costs? Or are you telling them the all-in cost of the company for flying 2,000 people out to Vegas?
Or I remember somebody telling me when we first kind of got into the budgeting piece, like, well, we don't know till like 3 or 4 months after the event's over how much it costs. I'm like, that can't be true. That absolutely cannot be true. No, it's true. And the reason it's true is because exactly like you said, we're going to go exhibit at this conference. Well, the CEO finds out, or the CMO or CCO or what, it's always C-suite. We have to blame everything on them, right? They decide, oh, we've got this client we've been courting for the last 2 years. They're actually coming to the event. Well, they, the night before book a first class flight and a nice hotel and then take them to a $500, lunch and a $10,000 dinner. All of that gets billed back to your event, but you don't know that it gets billed back to your event until a month later when they finish the expense reports. And then it's a month for accounting to get it back to your, so that trying to capture some of those sort of softer, peripheral costs is tricky too.
Well, even from an annual conference perspective, that's a challenge too. So you have your event budget. Here's what it costs you to put on your 40,000 person event. But what about every single business unit that held their own hospitality events, ancillary events, off-site activities or whatever that aren't coded to your event, but it was because of your event that they happened. So are you tracking that too?
I love it. All right, guys. So we only got a couple more minutes left, so we got to start wrapping up. Even though the questions are flying on in, we will try to answer as much of them offline as possible. I want to jump into our last 2 questions. We always ask, starting off with, if you had one single tip, bring it down to one single tip that you could give event planners today to make their event planning process easier, their life easier, and their events more successful, what would be your one tip? Liz, you want to? Oh, Chris, unmuted first. Chris, go ahead.
It's like, yeah, quick draw my God. No, I would say it's find something you can improve. Find something in your process that's sticky, it's painful, that is there's a better way to do it, and just dedicate some time to making it better. Doesn't matter what it is, right? It could be what kind of coffee you have in the office. It doesn't matter. If it's find something that's painful in your process and find a better way to do it, or a different way to do it. And then because once you do one and you see that you can do that one thing better, it will motivate you to continue. It's a small win, right? It's the Dave Ramsey mentality. Start with a small win, and then you'll get bigger and bigger and bigger, and you'll revolutionize how you're doing things over time.
I love that. I love that very much. I think that I'm very much the same way. Every quarter I review, like, what are the things I want to delegate? What sort of process can we improve? And I just have this huge list, and I just chunk at it, and that's how you improve little bit by little. Liz, what about you? What's your one tip?
Mine is to always say yes to capabilities presentations from agencies, vendors, and suppliers, because you meet amazing people and you learn what's happening outside of your organization. You're not navel gazing anymore. And you never know how that connection that you just made can help you or a colleague in the very near future. You learn about new tech that you never would have known about just through these conversations. And I think you don't have time to read all the blogs that exist in the world, but by talking to people that are pitching their stuff, you learn so much.
Awesome. Wow. You must be so busy.
I like that.
No, I dedicate an hour every Thursday for capabilities presentation, so I can we'll put you in the schedule.
That's cool. I think sometimes we get so stuck saying no on sales pitches and things like that. But sometimes if you say yes, you might find something awesome. Awesome. Wow. Okay. We have a couple minutes left. I want to go into resources and talk about resources. I'm also, I'm going to give you guys, at the end of you giving resources, give you a chance to talk about some of the cool stuff you're doing. So I have a cool, give a chance for you to do some self-promotion at the end. So wait for that. But Chris, talk a little bit about some of your favorite resources. I know you got some cool stuff. You talked about Zapier already, but you got some cool books, things like that. What sort of resources do you recommend that help you get things done, all that jazz?
Yeah. So my absolute favorite thing to do is to go to other industries and see what they're doing and figure out how you can map that. It's always been my favorite thing to do ever since I was in college. I love finding ways like, how's the construction industry handling on-site communications, and how can we do that? So I just finished reading a book called 24 Assets. It's real short, it's really good, and it's about the basic concept is that every company's value is based upon 24 different assets that you have, right? Anything from how clean is your CRM all the way up to, how do you have a branded website where everything is coming out looking the same. And it's very much a tech sort of company basic type of thing, but I think events could take a lot from this book. I kept reading and I was like, oh, that's relevant to events too. That's relevant to an event. And not all of it is. It's maybe 20 instead of 24. There's some things that don't. But again, back to that whole startup versus event being very, very similar. I think that book was really, it was really profound. I really liked it. It's short. It was easy. You can read it in a weekend, and there's a lot of good takeaways from it.
Ooh, I like it. Any other resources that you want to share at all before I jump into some self-promotion?
Do you want me to do mine?
Yeah, go Liz.
Yeah, go ahead.
Right, here's my number one. This book, Death by Meeting by Patrick Lencioni, if you have not read it, helps you organize how to actually manage your meetings with your teams. And I absolutely love it. It tells you about the daily stand-up, the weekly tactical meeting, and the monthly strategic meeting. Actually get things organized so you're not repeating the same thing over and over, and get your teams on board. And then my second resource is this super cool thing called the self journal.
I love the self journal.
Do you have one of these?
I do it every day.
Yes, and it tells you everything. Like, it helps you set your targets and your goals and reflect on it every day. And it's just this great kind of meditation moment. And I absolutely love it.
Best self journal, by the way, it's called.
Best self journal. That's right.
Yeah, awesome. Highly recommend. I went from the 5-minute journal, and that's like the intro level. And then you go to the best self journal. It's like you get to like the advanced level of journaling at that point. Absolutely love that. Cool. I want you guys to get a chance to talk about some of the cool stuff you guys work on, because you guys are doing amazing stuff, and I think that people do need to know about it. I'm going to kick it over to Chris. Chris, tell people a little bit about what EventOps is. You've been awesome. He hasn't talked about his software at all this entire time, guys. But Chris, talk a little about what EventOps software is. And then you guys just got done with a user conference too. So if you maybe want to talk a little bit about that and give that a little bit of a self-plug.
Yeah, so actually self-plug on the conference is that it hasn't happened yet.
Hasn't happened yet. That's right.
It hasn't happened yet, yeah. 26th of July at the Link in Vegas. It's actually along with the Event Tech Tribe, right, which is our family of 7 event techs that are working together to show that the all-in-one is not the one and all. That we put together 7 pieces of technology that work together, talk together. Our companies are in lockstep with each other, building really, really awesome tech that actually solves a lot of problems. And we're going to be together. We've got Kevin from HubSpot. We've got Amy Walters from Atlassian. We've got Dahlia is going to be, it's an unconference. Liz was instrumental in helping us sort of figure out how to do that because Liz is awesome, as we all know. So it's going to be fun. We've got a whole day. It's the same week as Event Connect. So if you're going to be there, you can just tack on your last day before you head home. It's going to be a lot of fun. We actually, the unconference portion of it is about trying to build an event tech manifesto. Like, what should event tech actually be thinking about and doing to make lives easier in events? Because I think it's really, really easy as somebody that's running an event tech company to think, I know how to make your life easier. And in fact, I may not, because guess what? I don't put on events every single day. Shocking, I know. But listening and understanding how we can do things better. So that's the conference event. EventOps is it's an operations and logistics software. So it's basically all of this non-sexy and mushroom in the dark room automated, right? So we do things like help corporations automate event requests within their owned facilities to actually make the event request and approval and budget process better, all the way through to production schedules and floor planning and space planning and task management, project management, communication and collaboration, event budgeting. It's a gigantic piece of software because it turns out that it takes a hell of a lot of work to make an event happen. It takes a lot of things happening in simpatico to make events happen. So we basically, back to that, it's everything that attendees sit on and eat and look at and have no idea how it got there, who put it there, or why it's there, how much somebody paid for it.
That's awesome. And it's pretty freaking cool. So get a chance when you take a look at it. Liz, I want to give you a chance to do some self-promotion too, because you're doing some awesome stuff and you're actually producing your own unconference as well. And every time I try to pronounce it, I fail.
Do it. Try it. Come on,
no,
do it. Come on.
So it's Haute Dokimazo?
Very close. Yes. That is yes. Very good.
I'm close. Very close. Okay.
Very close. Okay. So hot, but the fashionably elegant or high class hot, but it is truly pronounced haute, but because we're super American, we call it hot. And then dokimazo, which sounds Japanese, but is actually the Greek word for to try or to prove that something is genuine, to experiment with something. So we created Haute Dokimazo as an industry conference for event professionals where we bring in 50 brands and agencies, 50 brands and associations and 50 agencies and suppliers. So we have an equal ratio. We bring them together for crowdsourcing, a full day of conference, and then some targeted workshops. We also have a workshop that is for 25 agency CEOs to get together in a what happens here stays here kind of conversation that only agency CEOs can have together. We have done, let's see, our last one was just in Minneapolis, which was super exciting. Minneapolis in the summer is gorgeous. The mosquito is the state bird, by the way. And the next one is coming up in Vegas, November 11th through 13th. And we haven't launched reg for it yet, but you can look us up, hautedokimazo.com. You can put that in the resources. And then the second thing that I'm working on is corporateeventmarketer.com. So it is an online class to help event professionals understand the basics of modern marketing, from buyer's journey to full funnel marketing. I find that a lot of my team members really are spectacular event managers, but they don't fully understand all of the marketing concepts. So they're not having meaningful conversations with their leadership inside corporations or even with their marketing team. So this is to introduce attendees or event people to marketing.
Oh my gosh, so awesome. And for the record, so everyone can know about the unconference and how awesome it is, Liz has invited me to a million times, and I've been really trying to go, but it's unfortunately during every single time I can't make it. So if you want to see the level in which the people that are there, they're like our event icons and awesome level people. So definitely go take a look at that if you're interested. It's really, really huge. And then Chris, I know you have another resource that you want to mention.
Yeah, I just thought of one, because we've been talking so much about experimentation and creativity and all of that. So Google Ventures, right, which is Google's VC firm, essentially, they have a book, the guys that ran that for a long time, it's called Sprint, How to Solve Big Problems and Test New Ideas in Just 5 Days. It's written by Jake Knapp. It's awesome. It's a really it's dense. Like it's very much like, here's how to do it. Buy this many sticky notes, buy this many pens, get this size of a room. Here's how to do it. But it's really, really cool because they really dig into how to actually, anything from Blue Bottle Coffee to Slack, and they've done this with a bunch of different folks. But yeah, it's a great book, and I think if you're talking about, okay, we want to pick something and experiment with it, it's a really good methodology, really good process for actually being able to do that.
That's amazing. I love that sort of stuff. I'm going to go download it. It's about download, right? Versus buy?
You can do either one.
Cool. All right. Awesome. Well, it's already 6 p.m. Eastern, which means it's time to wrap up. We want to give a humongous thank you to Chris and Liz for being on this show. So many tactical tips, literally the mushroom in the dark, talking about how we actually get done. I love it completely. This has been an amazing episode. I hope you found a ton of value. Stick around for just a quick second while we recap, but I just want to give a quick thank you to our guests today. Liz and Chris, thank you guys for being on the show.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right. Well, we got to wrap up, but before you tune out, you might be watching this for the first time, or you might have been watching all 121 episodes, which you do. I want to hear it on Twitter. But if you don't know, we record this live every single week, except for last week because it was 4th of July. The first time I've ever taken a week off in the history of the show, which is really exciting. But every single week, 5 p.m. Eastern, right here, live on Zoom. Best way for you to watch it is to go to www.event-icons.com. If you're watching this on Facebook Live right now, or you're watching this on the podcast, or sign up there, because that's where we're going to email you all this awesome content, give you a chance to join our Facebook group where you get to actually connect with Chris and Liz and talk to them. You can literally add them on Facebook and talk to them, which is unprecedented. I don't know of any other podcast that allows you to do that. So super duper cool. And if you are looking to see the behind the scenes, we do a Facebook Live every week as well over on our event and endless events page as well. So if you want to see the behind the scenes right before we go on, and we actually posed a question to the audience before the show started, that's a place to go check that out as well. And then of course, we're on every single podcasting platform: Pocket Cast, Stitcher, iTunes, every podcast place you can think of. We're on your Google Homes. We're on your AWords, the Amazon Echoes. Everywhere you want to be, we're there. But again, Event-Icons is the best place to go. We're going to be posting all the show notes there, all the links mentioned, everything like that as well. Also, Twitter is the best place to talk with all of us. Hashtag EventIcons, obviously, is the best place to check out. Also, we're going to be doing some awesome Instagram content in the next coming weeks too, powered by Little Bird Told Media. So get ready to check that out as well. A lot of cool stuff happening. But we want to hear from you. Talk to us. Give us feedback. Tell us how awesome the episode. If you thought it was shit, we want to hear it. But this wasn't obviously a shit episode. This is an awesome episode. So make sure you give us your feedback. We want to hear all of it. And so then that way we can continue to make this show awesome. So again, shout outs to all the people who have joined us today. You are amazing. We're so excited. And we got to get out of here because I'm just rambling at this point. It's 6 p.m. Eastern. We'll see you guys next week on Event Icons, let's get out of here.
Thank you for joining us for another amazing episode of #EventIcons. To catch the transcription and all of the resources mentioned, head to www.helloendless.com/blog. This week's episode will be posted and available by next Tuesday. Also, let us know what you thought about this week's episode. Share your biggest takeaway.
And join the social conversation. Sponsored by Little Bird Told Media.
Just tag your post with #EventIcons. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you again for joining us. We'll see you next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, right here on #EventIcons.